was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties.
More serious than they took America and England. And then in 2016, she wrote a letter in which she tried to have a judge be more lenient with people who tried to join ISIS, saying that, of course, these were people who only became violent because of American marginalization. And then in 2017...
When words are treated as weapons, truth becomes the first casualty. In Washington, criticism is now being rebranded as violence. And Ilhan Omar is at the center of a firestorm after Donald Trump calls out her past 9/11 remarks. As the old political proverb goes, a ruler who fears questions fears the truth, and the reaction from Pelosi, the media, and the Democrats tells a much bigger story than they want you to see.
Congressman Ilhan Omar and her allies now using a new tactic against Donald Trump and the GOP. So after the president dinged the freshman rep in a tweet over her insensitive comments about 9/11, the freshman rep said that the mere criticism of her was akin to the incitement of violence. The media echo chamber, of course, was quick to highlight her concerns.
The freshman congresswoman says she has seen an increase in direct threats against her life after President Trump tweeted a video mixing footage of the congresswoman, who is Muslim, giving a recent speech with footage of the 9/11 attacks.
Nancy Pelosi is asking the U.S. Capitol Police to conduct a security assessment for Congresswoman Omar. The speaker is one of many Democrats now accusing the president of trying to incite violence against the first-term lawmaker.
Joining me now is Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire's editor-in-chief and author of the brand-new book, The Right Side of History, which is fantastic. Ben, now, this isn't about free speech. This is about downplaying one of the darkest days in our nation's history. Your take?
That's, of course, true, and she has a long history of not taking terrorism particularly seriously. In 2013, she did an interview in Minnesota in which she joked about people taking al-Qaeda and Hezbollah more seriously than they took America and England. And then in 2016, she wrote a letter in which she tried to have a judge be more lenient with people who tried to join ISIS, saying that, of course, these were people who only became violent because of American marginalization. And then in 2017, she wrote a column for Time magazine in which she suggested that America was rooted and founded on slavery and genocide. And in order for us not to look that in the face, instead, we focused on international terror. This is not someone who takes terrorism particularly seriously, so I am bewildered as to why quoting her would constitute some form of violation of her personage. It would be a violation of free speech or something nonsensical like that.
Ben, just so people know what we're talking about here, I want to play that soundbite that you're referencing where she talks about the way people say al-Qaeda. Let's watch.
When I was in college, I took a terrorism class. Every time the professor said Al-Qaeda, he sort of like his shoulders went up, and
he's in command here.
Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah. You don't say America with an intensity. You don't say England with an intensity. You don't say the army with an intensity.
Well, and Ben, Pete Buttigieg, we talked about him earlier. He's the new star of the Democrat Party. He's edged out Beto O'Rourke, and now he's taken that spot in the spotlight. He talked today about the consequences of otherizing people like her. I thought you'd love this. Let's watch.
One of the worst things that's happening right now is otherizing people. And if we're wondering whether this has real-world consequences, look no further than what happened not long ago in New Zealand. And yes, by the way, the president demonizing Representative Omar is part of this. It's dangerous, and it's got to stop.
Otherizing, Ben.
Well, very odd, since Representative Omar has 3 times in the last 3 months been chided for openly anti-Semitic statements, and then the Democratic Party has defended her. I'm amused to watch as the Democratic Party suggests that criticism and quoting of Ilhan Omar amounts to violent incitement, where Representative Omar can say whatever Jew-hating thing she wants on a daily basis, and that is not incitement. Now, I agree, it's not incitement in either case, but to pretend that it is incitement when it's stuff you don't like, and it's not incitement when it's stuff that you do, seems pretty irresponsible at the mildest.
Ben, thank you so much. Great to have you on tonight.
This morning, Trump threatened to abandon Puerto Rico recovery efforts. President Trump served notice Thursday that he may pull back federal relief workers from Puerto Rico, effectively threatening to abandon the U.S. territory amid a staggering humanitarian crisis in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. In a trio of tweets, he wrote, "We cannot keep FEMA, the military, and the first responders who have been amazing in Puerto Rico forever." On Thursday, he sought to shame the territory for its own plight. He tweeted, "Electric and all infrastructure was disaster before hurricanes." So you talked about what you, HUD, is doing in cooperation with, I guess, the administration. Do you agree with the president?
I certainly agree that Puerto Rico is a very important territory. The people from Puerto Rico have contributed greatly to the culture of America.
Well, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is these tweets where the president threatened to abandon Puerto Rico recovery efforts. Do you agree that they should be abandoned, that Puerto Rico should be abandoned?
Well, first of all, as I was saying, Puerto Rico is a very important part of our culture.
No, I know it's important, but I want to know whether or not you agree with the president who's threatening to abandon Puerto Rico recovery efforts.
I think I just said I have no intention of abandoning Puerto Rico. They're a very important part of who we are.
So you don't agree with the president? He tweeted, "Electric and all infrastructure was a disaster before the hurricanes," and sought to shame the territory for its own plight. Do you share that opinion?
I think that our job is to make sure that we take care of the disaster that has occurred.
So you don't agree that it should be abandoned, is that right?
Of course it should not be abandoned.
And you don't think that they should be shamed for its own plight, is that right?
There is no question that there have been a lot of difficulties in Puerto Rico. They ended up.
Should they be shamed for its own plight?
In debt. I don't think it is beneficial to go around shaming people in general.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear you don't agree with the president. I have serious concerns about the potential conflicts of interest with regard to HUD funds that are contributing to the profits of multifamily developments owned in part by the president and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Do you think it's appropriate that the president and his family are profiting from federal government funding intended to support low-income families?
If you can give me a specific example, I can address that question.
Well, I want to know if you think it's appropriate that the president and his family are profiting from any federal government funding intended to support low-income families.
I don't think it's appropriate for public officials in general to do that.
Okay. Do you stand by the president's decision not to divest himself of his interest in properties that receive HUD funding?
I think the best thing to do is tell me specifically what you're talking about, and then I can address it.
What have you done to ensure that HUD is properly handling these unprecedented conflicts of interest?
Again, if you can tell me what the specific thing is, I can address it.
These properties that are owned in part by the president.
Politics has always been rough, but there used to be a line between criticism and chaos. That line disappeared the moment Ilhan Omar decided that being questioned was the same thing as being threatened. After Donald Trump criticized her past remarks related to 9/11, the response wasn't debate, it was full-blown institutional panic. Nancy Pelosi stepped in almost immediately, requesting a Capitol Police security assessment, while the media echoed the same talking point, that criticizing Ilhan Omar was somehow dangerous. But history teaches a simple truth: public office is not a shield from accountability. When elected officials speak, their words don't vanish just because they become inconvenient. Ben Shapiro cut straight through the noise. He reminded everyone that Ilhan Omar's record didn't come from conservative spin, it came from her own words. Past interviews, public speeches, written columns, all documented, all real. And yet, suddenly, quoting those statements was framed as an act of aggression. Here's where the double standard explodes. Omar has repeatedly made statements many Americans consider dismissive toward terrorism and hostile toward Jewish communities. Democrats defended those remarks as free speech. But when Trump pushed back, or when commentators simply replayed her words, it was labeled incitement. As the proverb goes, the law bends for allies and hardens for opponents. Disagreement is tolerated only when it flows in one direction. The same party that claims to defend free expression now argues that criticism itself creates violence, a dangerous precedent for any republic. The media amplified this narrative, linking rhetoric to unrelated international tragedies, implying that holding Omar accountable could somehow trigger real-world harm. That leap isn't just irresponsible, it's strategic. Fear is easier to sell than facts. This isn't just about Trump or Omar. It's about whether accountability still exists in American politics. When politicians redefine scrutiny as danger, debate dies. And when debate dies, power stops listening. Ben Shapiro said it plainly. Criticism is not violence. A democracy that can't survive disagreement won't survive at all. History warns us, once speech is policed for comfort, tyranny enters quietly. The louder the effort to silence critics, the more necessary the criticism becomes.